Welcome to the Did You Know Crypto podcast. Today, I'm really happy to be welcoming Luke Mulks of the BAT and Brave browser. He's head of business development over there. And it's a really, really cool conversation. I've been fascinated by the economics of the basic attention token and how it's going to change how we interact online with ads and how publishers interact with us, the consumers. It's really, really cool. We also talk about why they decided not to go with Bitcoin and why that's controversial. But it's a conversation I've been looking forward to for a while, so I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's got some really neat ideas on how we can change how we advertise on the internet. I do have to apologize. My gain was turned up a little bit, and there's distortion on my end throughout the interview, so I apologize for that. It won't happen in the future. But first, if you could really quick go over to supportmypodcast.com, you'll see all the ways that you can support the podcast here. The easiest way, however, is if you just go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star and a written review, and that really, really helps. It bumps us up in the algorithms. You have no idea how much that really helps to spread the word and make the podcast more popular. But mostly, I'd like to say thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the Did You Know Crypto podcast. Today I'd like to welcome Luke Mulks, Director of Business Development for both the Brave browser and Basic Attention Token, an innovative product seeking to reinvent the relationship between advertisers, content creators, and their customers. Luke, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I've been a fan of Brave, been a user of the browser since it, first came out, and I think I can't remember the first time I heard about it. It was sometime last year, but its concept appealed to me, as well as the economic incentives made real sense. But why don't we tackle those kind of the two products separately? So first, let's talk about the Brave browser concept itself. And I know that they're definitely intermingled, and one is part of the other per se, but with the Brave browser and the way that it integrates BAT, what problem is it solving, and how does it specifically solve it?
Yeah, sure. So the problem basically, in order to browse a free internet now, you kind of have to sacrifice your privacy as a result. And also, you've got all these parties, these third parties and advertisers just kind of slowing down your internet, costing your battery, sucking up all your data, and it's all basically to track your behavior. And so what Brave kind of seeks to do as a browser is from a very fundamental level, just start by blocking anything that would track or record your behavior by default, and create an environment where you own the consent to basically give data to whoever you want to at your leisure. And so we're not opposed to people giving data to other parties on the web. It's more about just stopping this current condition of having everything be opt out only, and assuming that people can go ahead and track your behavior and collect that, and then make money off of it at your expense. Basically, the users and the publishers, they kind of get the short end of the stick. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do as a browser, is not only create a really cool fast browser that works really well, but also respect user privacy and create alternatives that allow for a web to operate and function, and businesses to transact and be businesses while protecting the user privacy and including the user in the deal.
And I think that's a very important thing. I think more people are starting to realize that kind of the early days of the internet, we kind of trusted maybe a little bit too much the concept, the open internet and just kind of this free for all that we had. And post basic, I would say probably the start of social media was really the big part, and maybe Google to an extent before that with their tracking and Google Ads. It used to be, because I remember that used to be a pretty good business you could run back in the day of setting up websites that basically ran off using Google Ads and then AdWords to. Well, do you have me on speaker maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm using the speaker.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just hearing myself a little bit.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. And used to be able to make quite a bit of money doing that, and then that started to fade off as I digress a little bit. But with the advent of social media and tracking and being able to collate all this data on everything that you do, I think more people are starting to wake up to that, especially in the post 2016 election, a little bit in the way that as they're starting to talk about how ads are getting targeted, although I think that's far overblown of what it actually was. The how powerful, especially on Facebook, how powerful those ads are. As anybody who runs like a business doing Facebook ads, it's a great resource because it's probably the best targeted ad product out there. But it's amazing how much data points that they have on you to really peg you down on who you are, what you like, and what you're probably going to like and want to do. And
It
go ahead.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, like for a little bit of background, right? I Before I came to Brave, I worked in digital advertising for a long time, and I worked for a company that basically was hired by publishers to kind of help integrate ad products with their developers and run campaigns and things like that. And when I started, mobile advertising was just starting to kind of pick up. But by the time I left, it was, there wasn't really a moment when you weren't getting tracked by somebody. And I think that, people don't really understand. It's almost unfathomable the amount of data collection that's going on, even when you're not accessing your device in a room. It's so big that, I mean, like when I saw what Bray was doing, it kind of got me motivated, like to see, okay, there's something over there that's new and potentially viable. So like but I think it's way over people's heads, like how much data these companies have, and what's being done with it and who it goes to.
Yeah, coming from a libertarian point of view, I think that for quite a long time there was the thought of that the big danger was state level collection, which is obviously something to be concerned about as far as in regards to constitutional protections or the violations there of those. But I think that a lot of what gets overlooked from people in my circles also the corporate side
Yeah.
and how much is being done at that level and how much can be done. I was just watching a documentary. I haven't had enough time to go back and actually look at the actual research behind it and all, the backing up of their claims. But I think it was called The Creepy Line. It was about Google mostly, but also it
Mhm.
goes into Facebook. And they talked about their ability. They did some studies on the ability for their how they can swing elections by how they stack what's on the first page of a search engine. If you search a specific candidate and most of the things are negative, versus another candidate where most of them are positive, they found, according to them, that they could swing upwards of 20% in an election, which
Wow.
shows you how powerful that is, and how
Yeah.
dangerous the corporate level can be.
It's one of those things where it's not necessarily a binary thing either. Like the government can tap right into the data that the businesses are collecting too. And I think that's the other part of this. It seemed like it was kind of an odd coincidence when you had these Snowden revelations come out, and then right after that, or maybe right around the same time, you start to see this whole data warehouse boom happen in the corporate space. And I mean, I worked with a lot of these companies, and the data collection they're doing is pretty insane. I mean, like it's kind of it's almost like a merger of the two, and it's kind of a shared threat to privacy. The fact that and the way the laws are with these like national security letters, you don't even know that things are happening, and if these companies tell you, then they're violating the law. It's very weird now. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to start like standing up, whether people are aware of it or not. Just having smart people trying to stand up new things is pretty important in my opinion.
And actually, if we could go back just a little bit, you mentioned, what you were doing before that. So where did you, before you got into Brave, what were you doing? And before you came into kind of the Brave and BAT world, were you into the Bitcoin circles, or was this kind of also your first foray into the area?
Yeah, so before I came to Brave, I worked for a company called OAO, and we did like outsourced ad operations for publishers. And so I worked for, the NFL was our client, and Comcast, Warner Brothers, a lot of big names in publishing and media, and we basically were kind of the go-between them and their ad serving stack. And so we learned a lot of the different ad product stacks and then how to integrate them. So kind of worked between sales, engineering, and the content itself. And so I was always been kind of interested in Bitcoin, and always been a little bit interested in privacy too. But I really didn't dive too far into it until I started at Brave and saw what they were doing. Because the first thing that kind of caught my eye, I was in a rabbit hole looking through like Tor videos and things like that, and I kind of stumbled upon on Twitter the request for comment for the Brave payments proof of concept, which was using Bitcoin, and it kind of reignited my earlier research into Bitcoin and got me excited about it again.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm always interested in people that kind of come from that background. I find digital marketing to be a very interesting world and much different. And I think that I'm sure that you saw that as well. That the like legacy companies who usually retained legacy advertising firms, how they have interacted with the digital world has always been about 10 steps behind for the most part. I mean, most
Yeah.
of these companies were not trying to get a Facebook page until Facebook pages were really not cool anymore. And it's always interesting how they do that. But and let's jump back into the basic attention token and Brave and what they're going to be doing differently, because well, actually, why don't we go into BAT? Why don't you explain how BAT, a basic attention token, will integrate with the Brave browser and also with other browsers as well in the future, and what
Yeah,
it
sure.
is going to do.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So the basic attention token, it's a ERC20 token, and we basically has a very distinct use case as the unit of account for attention within our platform. And so the way that you can kind of think about it is, it's almost like it's a utility token, and we've had utility in the platform since October of 2017, when we switched over from using a Bitcoin based proof of concept, and it basically has a distinct purpose of measuring and accounting for attention in the browser, and then later on, when we extend this through an SDK that'll be open source and secure, where other app developers can integrate the basic attention token into their apps. But basically, like, if you look at the way that advertising works now and the way that just kind of monetization works on the web, you're in an environment where nobody really trusts each other, and the people that don't trust each other are one thing, but the user doesn't really know that any of this stuff's going on. So, like, for example, when I was at my previous job, I would get emails from clients, and they were publishers, right? And we were hired guns, so they basically like pick our brains on things occasionally at an hourly rate. And so they would ask me to kind of check out some of the ad tags that they were running to see what the agency was doing and to track the publisher. And so you kind of get in this weird environment where you've got publishers that are being tracked by agencies kind of tracking the publishers, and vice versa, and then the user is getting tracked by everybody. And you'll have an ad creative, that banner that you see has like 4 or 5 different trackers loaded on it from different domains, and some of them are trying to make sure that what's getting measured is getting measured, and there's always these big discrepancies in between each of these things. So all you're really trying to do is look and see if somebody saw something, and then confirm that that's happened. And the situation is so dire in that space that it requires having all of these things happen, all these different parties tracking each other. And so what we're trying to do basically is say, look, we can pre-integrity to browsing, we can measure with integrity and use a token as a way to anonymously account for attention, and then over time, as the blockchain space matures, do more and more direct transactions on the blockchain, and have a kind of verifiable source of data and a source of truth for attributing attention. And so that's kind of where we're headed with this thing, and we're iterating, and we had to kind of we have to be pragmatic too, because we're a business, but and we have to operate in a compliant way. And publishers, there's a lot of great crypto publishers out there that are happy to accept crypto instead of fiat currency. But the reality is, if you start going to a lot of publishers and telling them that you've got this great crypto thing, they just, if I ask them about the bat, they're going to say, well, what's a Bitcoin, that kind of thing. And so, we built a model in a system to kind of be easy for publishers to jump on board, and make it so that we could get them participating. And as a result, I think we're at about 20,000 verified publishers, or 28,000 verified publishers and creators on our platform that are using the token. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's a unit of account for attention, and is a way for users to get rewarded and publishers to get rewarded for activity they do in the browser.
So, one of the questions, or I should say criticisms, that comes from the crypto community, mostly I would say from Bitcoin, the Maxless community, the Bitcoin only folks, is that originally you guys were going to integrate Bitcoin in this, and then at some point you switched to the ERC20 utility token. Um, their criticism of this is, one, why not use Bitcoin? Adding a token only adds friction into a system. Um, when when Bitcoin or any other crypto could have been used, in their case Bitcoin. Uh, so why go with an ERC20 token? And at some point, will you guys also be integrating other I guess payment channels in there so that people could pick from something like a stable coin or Bitcoin or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question, and yeah, that's a pretty fair assessment of the criticism. I mean, we get it from all sides too. But yeah, the Bitcoin maximalists definitely give us some feedback on a regular basis. So when we started doing this, we did use Bitcoin in our proof of concept, and it was kind of a timing thing too. We saw what was possible with the Ethereum blockchain, and writing applications and designing them on top of Ethereum, and from our point of view, there's a lot of interesting potential that we can go forward with smart contracts. And so, there are a couple other reasons too. I mean, like having a distinct purpose for this token, as a unit of account for attention, has benefits, especially when we are talking about transacting on advertising and attributing attention and measuring attention. It helps us also to like be able to do things like when we had our token sale, we set aside 300 million basic attention tokens into a user growth pool that we can use to provide BAT directly to users, which we've been doing since June of 2016 or 2018 on a recurring monthly basis. We've basically been giving out $5 in tokens to users to kind of bootstrap the platform. But we can use it for other things too, like B2B deals and partnerships. Like we had the Dow Jones partnership where we utilized the user growth pool to help subsidize attention for the subscriptions and things like that. Where having Bitcoin is great and everything like that, but it's kind of our thing is to just have this kind of designated unit of account and start to explore what's possible on the in the smart contract space. So it's not a shot against Bitcoin or anything like that. And there's a lot of us here that are big Bitcoin fans too. And we even have the option within Brave now for you to deposit Bitcoin in and convert it to BAT. So it's not like we completely turned it off either. It's just from our side, it was a really interesting opportunity for us to build something distinctive, something that really goes after the problem statement, because the advertising space and just monetizing attention on the web and attributing for it is there's so many problem statements involved that like having a distinct use case and a distinct token for that is something that it lets us put focus on that work without kind of being at the mercy of some other factors that we might be at the mercy of if we are using something more general. So I mean, I hear the feedback from people, and it's definitely free to provide it. And there's merits to everything, right? But from our point of view, having our own token was something that was just like kind of the right thing at the right time, and it gives us some freedom to kind of like set us ourselves aside from some of the other I don't know, this stuff's so tribal, with a lot of these projects and these tokens, that even researching it is kind of hard these days. And so like we really want this thing to stand up and have it in a viable space where we can make it our thing.
Was there, as far as for in the future, is it going to be well, I mean, like BAT and Brave are both products of the same company. But you don't necessarily need. I mean, because technically, in the white paper, I believe for BAT, it's open for Chrome or Safari or Mozilla to take and integrate that, or you guys could create plugins if you want to and integrate BAT um, into those other browsers. Correct?
Right. So yeah, we definitely. I mean, we've been big on this from the beginning, where ultimately we want to extend the bat outside of the browser. And from our point of view, like the ad platform that we're releasing is basically the last leg of the stool. Once we get that stood up, we can prove out the entire utility case and the economics of it. And at that point, once we have that stood up, we're going to be working aggressively to get the SDK out there and work on other like browser integrations and things like that. And I mean, our code is open source too. There was a guy that a developer that made a Batify Chrome extension almost a year ago, and I'm not sure what's up with it lately, but he did that and it was in the Chrome store for a while. I think it might still be there, but that's an important thing here too. Like all of our code's open sourced and auditable, and we're all about kind of people playing with things. And so you could definitely prepare to see the bat go beyond Brave, and within Brave too. I mean, it's not just limited to the bat either. I think that you could look at especially our desktop browser as kind of a playground for all these new Web3 protocols and for other, for people to kind of have freedom to do what they want with their crypto and not just make it about the bat, but have the bat be kind of this, almost like a reward point or this utility in the browser that kind of keeps the attention moving forward.
Yeah, so that was kind of what I was getting at, was that the BAT and Brave itself are not necessarily tied together, because I mean you could see BAT become the bigger thing, and as it goes browser wide. Um, but where I guess where is the company's focus at the moment? Is it kind of 50-50, or are you guys focusing more on getting basic attention token awareness out there that will drive traffic to Brave, or vice versa?
Well, I would say that like our primary focus right now is on the browser. I mean, and the bats kind of goes hand in hand with the browser, but there's a lot that we're trying to stand up within the integrated platform too. So most eyes are just strictly on getting the platform stood up in the browser, so we can prove out the full use case and the economics of it. So I would say like the most of the attention is on Brave, and we've done a lot of things too. I mean, this last fall, we completely overhauled our desktop browser, and so now we're using the Chromium front end. We had previously had an Electron fork that we called Muon. It was a hard fork of Electron that we're using on the front end of our browser, and we changed it over to we were calling it internally Brave Core, but it's basically the Chromium front end. And so what you get with that is you get a lot more of the like. I used to do a lot. I mean, I've gone to a lot of hackathons and things like that, and talked to hundreds of people about this. And the number one complaint I would get from people is like, I love the daily using Brave, but I can't use it as a daily driver until you guys support the extensions that I want and use. And this new front end that we put on has allowed for that to happen. So pretty much any extension that you're using in Chrome, you can now use in Brave on our desktop browser, and that's available too on Brave.com to all new users, and you can upgrade your existing browser if you're using our older version to jump onto the new one. And so a lot of focus has been on the browser as well. We're working on getting the token into mobile as well, because right now the token's only on desktop. So in the next, I think the next month, you'll start to see our Android browser integrating the token, and that'll get pretty interesting too. I think because we a majority of our user base is on mobile, and so I think that if we're doing our job right here, there are two things that we're doing. One is mainstreaming privacy without users having to know that we're mainstreaming privacy. It just works. And the other piece is kind of mainstreaming, token utility in the browser. And it's a similar situation where like stuff's over so many people's heads, it just has to work. And so if we can do that on mobile, it could be. I mean, we're looking at huge numbers of people that are all of a sudden using the stuff that weren't before. And I think that like regardless of what your favorite or what you're loyal to as far as the blockchains go and tokens, et cetera. Like I think that having this technology in people's hands is the most important thing right now. And I think that, if you, and this is my own personal opinion on this, right? Like if you look at the space, it gets pretty toxic. And if you try and put yourself in the point of view of somebody that's, trying to learn this stuff, don't even go to Twitter. Like you find just it's really hard to learn because people are so biased on this stuff. And I think that's one of the things that communities can work on, and we all need to do kind of a better job with, is just trying to, like, look at the positives of what each of these projects and brings to the table, and trying to see, like, what works and what doesn't work. And I mean, I don't know, it's so odd to me that this space is, I mean, Bitcoin's been around for a while, but this space is so new, and people have such strong opinions. It's really interesting to me.
No, I agree. The opinions do run strong. I do understand better nowadays why, mostly in the maximalist camp, why they have a lot, very strong opinions. I have a lot of sympathies with them in the fact that I understand the goal that they're trying to accomplish, and Bitcoin being the best way to achieve that goal. Why they would be extremely passionate about that, and then also very negative towards anything that they feel would distract from that. So I do understand that. But going back to your point of mainstreaming privacy, I love that concept of just like of understanding users, because the average user doesn't care about the reasons for why this X should be. It's if you make it easy, and you make it easier than not, the right. If you make the right thing easier to do than the wrong thing, they will do the right thing. If you make the wrong thing easier to do, they will do the wrong thing. And I think that's one of the things that's missing a lot in this space, is just the concept of just a simple and easy UX, um, that that's kind of a point click, and until you get to that point click done, that it's as easy as everything that they use on a daily basis, then the average person isn't going to adopt this stuff. And the fact that you guys are focusing on that, I think is really cool and really important, because like I said, once you make these things so simple that they don't even know that they're keeping their information private and doing the right thing in regards to their privacy, people aren't going to do it. But if the way you guys are approaching it, I'm very, very hopeful for that. But with I think we should also talk maybe just a little bit about the, from both the content creator and the the customer / user point of view, is that most people listening excuse me, are probably users and don't quite understand the kind of issue that's facing content creators out there, because 5 years ago or so, ads like on your sidebar of your website or whatever, it worked pretty good. Or even pop-ups are still, the reason that they're out there is because they're effective. But
Right.
there's a reason, like, everybody hates them, but anybody that's ever run any kind of content or any kind of website knows that pop-ups work better than if you just have something like at the top of every blog post or bottom of every blog post. But the diminishing returns has been, you see it year after year for the most part on a lot of these, quote unquote, tried and true stuff in the digital space. The sidebar or the Google ads is starting to lose its effectiveness. It's still worthwhile, but your bang for your buck's going down. So what people are seeing now as content creators is that people are opting out. They're using ad blocking stuff. It's harder to get. So the question is, like, how do we get people to how do I subsidize my content, or not subsidize, but be paid for what I put out there in a way, but not overly exhaust people. And I think that the BAT concept, that the Brave browser integration of that is a really cool concept. If you wanted to kind of, I don't know if you had any thoughts on how this kind of went over what problem it was solving, but if you want to go a little bit deeper into helping people understand
Sure.
the content creator's point of view with this. Hey folks, I hope that you're enjoying this episode as much as we are. I don't have any sponsors, so if you could go over to supportmypodcast.com, you'll see all the different ways that you can support the podcast, from Amazon links to a bunch of other stuff, and you can back us on Bitback or with crypto. But most of all, if you can go to iTunes and leave a 5-star and a written review, it'd be very, very helpful. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and yeah, just to echo that, I mean, the content creators and publishers too, right? Like they're both, the users aren't the only ones getting the bad end of the stick. I mean, the users pay in a bad experience that they get, from having it be 2018 and pages, seeming to load slower on faster devices than they have because of all these parties that are tracking them, but the publishers really get creamed. I mean, and content creators too. You're really, as Google and Facebook have gotten bigger, you just really become under the thumb of them. Any changes that they make have a serious impact. And on the publisher side, like from my own past experience, it was almost like a fashion form of acronyms every year. You're chasing the new three-letter acronym, and you've got to have this to get the most yield, and that to get the most yield. And I mean, when I started, things were very mapped out. Publisher would map out their content very carefully in their ad architecture to make sure that when a user is on a certain page, that the ads match with the content. And it was very contextual. And what you started to see changing was this kind of explosion of like audience creation and expanding it and moving the target away from the content and putting it on the back of the user, because you could all of a sudden do that with mobile and with all the connected devices. And so for publishers, it's been kind of chasing their tail for a long time. And it's been tricky too. Like I remember we had clients, and when Google AMP and like Facebook Instant Articles came out, they were sold as a positive to publishers, and they would say, yeah, you can come and get these new revenue sources. We'll even put you at the top of the search carousel, and really we're promoting the hell out of AMP and Facebook Instant. And it took about 15 months for publishers to really feel the brunt of that, because when you have users, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, when you have users coming to your site, the ads you're getting on your own site, are much richer. You're getting much better return on those things. And when Google all of a sudden starts to, siphon your content into their space, into their domain, you lose a lot of that revenue, and it's to Google's benefit. And so publishers I feel really bad for them. They're trying, and there's a reason why clickbait's been a thing. That part of them are trying to keep the quality of the content up, but the reality too, you got to pay people, and that stuff sells. People move to that stuff, and it's like, but for the creators too, oh my gosh, it's been really rough. Like we started supporting YouTube creators in November of 20, I think it was 2017, and we started to support YouTube creators on the platform. We did a lot of engaging with them to try and get an idea for like how much of your ad revenue is ad revenue, and like what are you trying to do to kind of offset that, because it was right when YouTube started to change their algorithms and label things as sensitive content, and really it was kind of start of that demonetization thing. And we would talk to people that were with YouTube from the very beginning, and they're saying, look, like it's really weird. I've got millions and millions of subscribers now, and my ad revenue is 30 to 50% less than it was last year, and I don't know why. They're making what they think is safe content, but for some reason, and some of this was probably like a bit of manual selection versus collisions and algorithms that are targeting and all that stuff. But I think the main takeaway was that YouTube made a decision, right? Like, and instead of backing supporting the content creators, they decided that they were going to side heavily with what brands felt safe with, and anything that felt remotely unsafe basically got demonetized. And there were a lot of bugs there, and I'm sure you saw it too. People would put the same video up with two different titles, and one of them would get ads and one wouldn't. And so like this thing that creators used to use like very easily became not as easy to use anymore. And when you're trying to make a living as a creator, and all of a sudden overnight, you're losing 20 or 30% of your revenue because of some algorithm change, you have to get pretty scrappy and think of new ways to do it. And that's one of the reasons why we started supporting those YouTube creators, because, it was kind of an opportune moment for us to do that. But it also wasn't very hard for us to adapt what we were doing for publishers to content creators. And a lot of them have their own websites. So, for us, it was some added value for them that we could provide. But yeah, it's rough out there. And more and more users are on the internet, but more and more creators pop up too, and it's a tough road for them. I mean, some of the stuff with Patreon and others, Patreon really picked up, and a lot of these creators are using that too. And but they have their own challenges. It's a tricky space to work in.
No, it definitely is, and it's as the ad landscape, as things have gotten, as digital and technological advancements have come, it's only moved faster because you kind of look at the way that ads and companies using those ads were targeting customers. It was fairly constant. There were changes as culture changed over time, but then once the internet hit, like things really started to change quickly, and people or what am I thinking? I'm sorry. We're in a little bit of Dayquil. For- a
It's
little
okay.
forgetful here, but uh, as things started to change and adapt very quickly with what people wanted, where people's attention was, and how ad content creators and people would be able to target their users and be able to monetize their content. It's changing so much more rapidly, like constantly. Um, and this is Oh, you go ahead.
Oh no, it totally is. I mean, and it's changing to Google and Facebook's favor. I mean, these campaigns that used to be that programmatic ads were what you ran when you didn't have anything better to run, and Google quickly spun it around and said, look, like if you're a publisher, how about we enable this feature that lets us compete against your direct buys? And all of a sudden, there goes your sales staff. And so, like, it's because they're really good at it, but they collect so much data. I think that's the thing people don't really understand either. You think about Google, and it's a search company to most people. It's not like this huge advertising thing. They're making over 90% of their revenues from advertising, and people, they still think of it as just a search engine, or Facebook too. I mean, and they're so massive. It's wild.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, just from messing around with Facebook ads and being able to go, like, I was trying to explain it to some people that were running businesses and going, like, like Facebook ads are bar none, regardless of what you feel about the company. I think is the best ad targeting platform out there. Depends on who you're exactly targeting. If you're in the crypto world, like I can't do anything with my podcast right now on Facebook or Instagram because I can't run ads because there's very few people that have been approved. But especially if you're targeting like maybe a little bit older demographic, like the ability for you to go like, okay, I want to target, you know, um, within 20 miles of my restaurant, single mothers who make between $30,000 and $40,000 or $25,000 and $35,000, whatever it is, because according to our research data, they're the ones who buy our product or or take and bake pizza or whatever it is, right? So that's our direct market. I want to target them, and you can really, like, when you do it, like, you will see some real great ROI on there. And that's
Oh
not just
yeah.
because they're guessing who is these things. Like, the ability for them to be able to guess or to know my income without me actually technically telling them that based on what I like, what I say I do, or the different products that I've liked and bought. And it's pretty crazy. It's great, like I said, from somebody who's trying to target ads. Not maybe so great 20 years down the road when everything that you've ever done, said, bought, or thought online is now collated and put into a nice little file for you.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, Facebook's targeting is fantastic, right? Like, and it's one of those things where they made a bunch of strategic buys early too. Instagram, et cetera, where like they've really figured out how to dominate it. And it does. The thing that was really interesting to me is, I mentioned this earlier, where things kind of were contextual, and then they moved towards audience growing and moving the target on the users back, right? Like, I mean, Facebook has just taken it to another level too. Like, they can infer things based on your circles, who you hang out with, who you're friends with on the network but aren't hanging out with in real life, that kind of stuff. I mean, it just shows you how much this data collection and retargeting has matured over such a short amount of time. And we're talking about less than 10 years here for this type of rapid growth, and for Facebook to know what they know, it's just incredible. It's great on in some regards, but like, it's always a trade-off for convenience, for privacy. But man, when you start to see some of the things that happen, and some of the impact of that, I think we're barely even understanding what some of the long-term effects of all this data collection are. I mean, and if you look at things like GDPR in Europe, where people are starting to get disclosed, like how many parties are actually tracking them on a website, not even a mobile app where you've got even more data collection going on. But like, you can scroll on some websites and see a list of 200 plus vendors that are tracking your data, and most of them are names that people have never even heard of. And it's like, once you start going into this rabbit hole, like, I mean, I ran campaigns for many years, and I can't tell you where the data stops. Like, one vendor passes it to another, they copy it and store it somewhere else. And so there's not a real high bar for integrity with the existing landscape. And a lot of it, I don't think it's as menacing as people think it is. I think a lot of it is just that money came in fast and kept going. And when there's a boom, there's a boom. And I don't think a lot of these engineering and companies were thinking about the long-term effects of this on privacy and just on kind of society too, like you were mentioning earlier with Facebook and the elections, right? Like, it's a powerful tool to influence people. And like, I'm always in the camp where people make their own decisions, right? Like, and I a lot of this stuff is just kind of noise to me. But there is a big value in these platforms being able to leverage and kind of try and influence people regardless of how they end up voting or whatever. But like, the ability to kind of stir the pot and get the hive going is incredible. I mean, and it's so fast. It's just you don't blink or you're gonna miss it.
Yeah, actually, it was interesting. One of the people who did that Creepy Line documentary, they also, one of the things they talked about was that anybody that uses Facebook, when elections are coming up, usually you'll see um, these little reminders like the last day to register to vote is next Monday or whatever, right? Or don't forget to vote. The day of November 6th of election day. And what their point was is that what if they decided, whether it doesn't have to be a national election, it could be say there's a city that they want to move into and open up something, but there's some local politicians that are opposing that move, and they decide to go into that local city election and remind all the people that have liked the page of the person who's running against the guy that they don't like, remind them to vote, but don't remind the other guys, whoever's liked the other guy's page, to vote. And there's really no, technically, probably a record of that per se, of who they tell
Right.
to. But I mean, that it's an interesting way. But it is a segue back to Brave. What you kind of, you've gone over a little bit about the privacy integration, but what specifically in the Brave browser are as compared to what's natively done in Chrome, Mozilla, Safari, the other big three. What would a user who uses Brave instead of those ones, what specifically privacy features are they going to be enjoying that they would not enjoy over there, or that the only way they could is if they downloaded a side plugin or something?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. And really early on, we took a really hard line with what we block by default, and we also put some care into that too, right? Like, we don't want to make it where publishers can't advertise, first party ads on their website. So if an ad looks like a piece of content, we don't block that. Like, we don't block squares in the web page. And we make sure that anything that goes to a third party gets blocked. And it's on the block list. So what you get from us is much more aggressive privacy protection out of the box. We have third-party fingerprinting protection, which is another area in the privacy space where you can identify a person based off of different characteristics in the browser. So if you have enough of these things together, the target gets pretty low. And so what we started to do is we integrated third-party fingerprinting protection by default, third-party ad blocking and tracking protection by default. We upgrade connections from HTTP to HTTPS whenever possible, and then we do other things like we stay up to date with Chromium for security. We also do things like we have a Tor integration on our desktop browser where you get windows that can access the Tor network for the internet connection, which provides a good anonymity tool for people when they want to browse in the browser and have anonymity. And there's a lot of other things. I mean, a lot of this goes into the decision making. Like are we making? We say no a lot to potential opportunities, and also to like design and other decisions, because anything that would kind of compromise our promise to our user base or is something that we say no to. And so I've never seen anything like it. Actually, if I'm being quite honest, like nothing like this in the advertising space from before. But it goes beyond that too. I mean, like one of the things with the token and with what we're integrating into Brave is like, what happens if you take privacy by design and then apply that to the web, the business doing, I mean, businesses online, right? Like, how can we design a model where you can account for activity, and like an advertiser just wants to know, right? Like that they targeted something to people, and that those people engaged with whatever they were putting out there, whether they engaged with it or not, or thumb up, thumb down, click through, whatever. These are events that we can account for, and we can account for them without having to put a user ID on it, or having to have people feel like they're getting followed by things. And so by everything is kind of about what we're doing with advertising is private by design. So like even the way that we serve ads, the thing that all these advertisers tell you when you sign over your privacy to them by participating is basically that we need to collect all this data because you in turn get relevant advertising. And in 2018, it's kind of silly that all of these ads are matched in the cloud by all these third parties, and you're surrendering. It's kind of like a similar line to when you sacrifice your liberties for protection, right, or for security. It's a similar thing with like relevancy in advertising. And so, like, in order to get this free web, you basically hand over the keys to your privacy to these parties that you don't know, and then they put ads in front of your face everywhere, and then you get tracked, and your data gets passed through the Lumascape, and that's what you get for a free internet. And we think technology's improved. There are ways like cryptographically that we can account for things anonymously with zero knowledge on our side. So like we don't have to collect the data, but we can attribute for the activity. And even with the ad serving, like with Brave Ads, and we actually just today we released on our developer channel the ability for the public to actually kind of test drive our ad platform. And so what we're doing with the ad platform is we're saying, look, we can take all of the ad opportunities for your region, compress them down into edge cached URLs, and then send that to all of the devices and put the ad server on the device. And so you have a smart device and you have a smart ad server that's local to the device. And instead of dealing with third party ad matching in the cloud through central authorities, we do the ad matching locally on the device from the entire browsing corpus of data. So you get a much fuller context if you're matching ads to that than you do from having third parties kind of bidding against keywords or bidding against data that they've been collecting. And you get a much more relevant ad selection process. And so we're kind of turning the ad matching part on its lid, but it's all in the name of privacy, because and I was working with the team on this stuff early on, and it was one of those things where we're able to update block lists every night that have URLs that change, right? Like why can't we just do that with the ads too, and then use like machine learning locally and kind of match these things and end up with something really relevant, and not have to show a user like 100 ads. You can show them 5 ads an hour, and they can be high quality ads that are matched locally and respect their privacy, and have that be a new way that people can monetize, and give them something for it. It's kind of a lot of little things that we're solving in a big way, I think.
No, that sounds great. I was going to actually ask you about the Tor integration, but you already answered that. So, um, and that kind of answered all the questions that I had. Was there anything else, whether it's to content creators out there, to users, publishers, anything? Was there anything else that you want to let them know about the browser or BAT?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you haven't checked out our new browser, I would suggest going to brave.com and giving it a spin. It's much improved over our old desktop browser. And then we're available on all platforms. Also, if you go to brave.com and you go to our blog page, we actually announced this morning that we have a preview, developer channel preview for Brave Ads that's available now to the public. So if you download our Brave developer channel release, you can actually go into Brave Rewards and enable it and get a feel for what the ads are going to look like. You don't get token rewards yet for the ads, but that'll be coming in a couple weeks. And so feel free. We're out there on the internet. We're on Twitter. We're out and about. So give us a shout, or if you have any questions, we're happy to kind of, we're pretty engaged with the public. So yeah, go to brave.com and check everything out.
Yeah, and I'll have links to all those social media profiles, the blog, and the website and everything that you mentioned. And thank you so much, Luke, for taking time out of your night, since we're recording in the evening, and coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been really enjoyable.
No, it was for me as well. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.